Flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Beat Army. And as we always do, we're going to have a moment of silence where I'd like you to think about all the good things in life that we experience and how good it is to live in Flagler County. And think of our first responders and our men and women in the armed forces. Please join me. Thank you. Well, welcome, everybody, all 6 of you. First up is the health insurance discussion. And Heidi, are you going to do this? Or?
Actually, we've invited Sherry to come here today to
Okay.
give you an overview. This is the information that when we met internally with our group of constitutional officers,
Right.
We went over this previously, and I know Commissioner O'Brien's probably seen most of this already himself.
I'm counting on him to make us all smart. Don.
Good afternoon. My name's Sherry Beignet with the Bailey Group. I am also a resident here in Flagler County, so it's good to see you all again. We have quite a bit of information to go through today. Hopefully I'll be able to get through this pretty quickly. The first couple slides relates to your actual expenses over the last few months. The first 2 columns are comparing October through April from the 21-22 calendar or plan year. And then the second column is October through April for the 22-23 plan year. You can see so far this year, up through the end of April, we are upside down right now about $1 million, just over $1 million. We ended last year $672,000 upside down. So we're making up for lost revenue last year as well as so far this year. If you remember, we did have an increase in the funding last year for the current plan year, but we did do less than what the actuary had recommended, knowing that there was probably some additional funding that might be able to go in there. So this is purely looking at expenses versus the employee and employer contributions into the plan. The next slide gives you your total number of claimants over a certain threshold. So far this year we have 6 people who have claims over $50,000. 1 individual who has claims over $100,000, and we have 1 individual that actually just this last month in April hit the 175 mark. Your coverage currently has a stop loss product associated with it, so when anybody goes over that $175,000, that reinsurance or stop loss reimburses you for the amount over that amount. We have not received that yet. It will take another couple weeks, but we should be receiving those funds pretty soon here for the amounts over the $175,000. That individual.
How much over 175?
That one, how much would it be reimbursed?
Yeah.
Anything over $175,000.
We don't know what that is yet.
Yeah, right now, we're still in April. We still have a few more months to go, and this individual could have some additional claims.
Okay.
So we definitely do not think that this is the end. I believe, if I remember right, it's about $230,000 that this individual hit for claims up through the end of April. The next slide shows you a comparison of your expenses on a per employee per month basis. And the way that I do this is not based on belly buttons, so each individual employee, but and dependent, it's actually based on each individual employee. So if somebody has family coverage, they count as 1 individual rather than however many people they have in their family. But this is a good way for us to compare expenses and kind of see whether we're trending up or down. You can see your active population is trending up slightly compared to last year. By the way, your stop loss reimbursements and your prescription rebates are not included in this. So this is pure claim expenses and not including any reimbursements that you would have received. We had a really good year actually last year. We ended the year pretty good and didn't have a whole lot of high-cost claimants. And so that one individual has really impacted our expenses so far this year. We see the retiree population expenses have gone down. You can see the medical has gone down pretty significantly, but the prescription side has gone up. Not unusual. We do have a pretty small population in that retirement segment. I think there's about a dozen or so individuals that are retirees that are included in that population. And there are very few employees or COBRA members that are included, 1 or 2 is all. So this looks very skewed, and it's not a surprise. You're not going to take COBRA unless you've got some health issues going on. So this is very typical of what we see. We have seen those COBRA expenses go down so far this year.
So we pay that. We pay the COBRA.
The COBRA members pay a premium. They pay the entire, what we call fully insured equivalence, which is in essence what we would pay if you were fully insured. But you, as an organization, are actually paying their claims. So if they are costing you, you can see a lot more than what their premium potentially is, because that's very typical. By law, we have to charge them what those fully insured equivalents are. Same thing with retirees. We charge them the actual fully insured equivalents, and the actuary is the one that calculates what that needs to be. And it's based on the claims within the entire group.
Okay, thank you.
Of course. Another thing that's important for us to take a look at every year, or not necessarily every year, but this year, is our pharmacy benefit manager. In other words, your pharmacy coverage, who is the carrier, in essence, that is covering those. And this year, we do have your contract up for renewal through Optum is your current carrier. It was marketed by our internal PBM marketing team, and we were able to secure a reduction in costs through Optum by 18.37%. This is going to be roughly around $200,000. What they do when they market this is they take a look at what your claims were in a certain period of time, and they reprice those claims. And when we looked at those originally, those claims included sheriff's office employees because it was from the 22 calendar year. So we are estimating that it's going to be about $200,000. Somebody could be taking a much more expensive medication. It could be a lower amount. It could be a higher amount. All depends on what prescriptions actually flow through the plan. But we see about a $200,000 reduction estimated there. The other good thing about the contract that Optum is going to be putting in place is that it can be, in essence, renegotiated every year. So your prior contract with Optum was a 3-year contract, and we were kind of locked into the discounts that they had or the rates that they had originally gave us back in 3 years ago. But we are able now, because this market is changing very quickly, to basically renegotiate that every year. And if the costs have gone down on certain medications, we will be able to take advantage of that reduction in the cost. So that's nice as an additional piece that we would have the ability to do. So we do recommend renewing with Optum. They gave us the best contract with a nice low reduction in cost and literally no disruption. If we were to have moved to any other carrier, we would have had a pretty major disruption in the medications that were covered. People would have had to get new authorizations for their medications, things of that sort. So we feel that Optum is a great option for you to continue with. We also advise or recommend that you add 2 additional programs. The first one is called the Vigilant Drug Program through Optum, and this basically temporarily excludes any newly launched drug until it has an opportunity to go through a review through a committee. And this is targeted on these very, very expensive gene therapy medications that are starting to come out now. I don't know if you've seen anything about these in the news, but there are some of these that are $2 million per prescription, these types of medications. They're amazing medications, but they're super expensive. And so we want to make sure that we're not exposed to some potential there. We would potentially cover them depending on the scenario, but we want to exclude them on the front end so that they don't get slipped underneath without us having an opportunity with the pharmacy consultant to really take a look at whether or not that medication could be covered or should be covered based on what's going on and what else is available. There are some of those that I definitely would recommend covering potentially, but others that I wouldn't. So we definitely want to include that so that we have that additional protection for you. The other program that we recommend is called Price Edge. And this is basically a program where you can get a discount card as a member and be able to use that discount card. And that helps reduce the cost for both the employee and the employer. And the estimated savings for adding that program is $1,601. It's not a lot of savings, but there's no cost to you, and it's a big advantage to your employees to be able to have access to that. Okay.
I have a question on the vigilant drug program. How long does the committee take to review new drugs? Is it any timeline? Or?
It totally depends on the medication. I could see it happening very quickly with some medications. We most of the time know that these medications are going to be coming out, a few months or maybe up to a year before they actually come out. But depending on the scenario, it could take 6 months before they're actually completed the review.
And did you say there was an escalation process, like a review process for a claim in
Absolutely.
case they do need the med?
Absolutely. If there is a situation that we need to deal with on a more urgent basis, we could absolutely review that option.
So you're going to review the new drugs regardless, but if somebody actually asks for the drug, then you would speak.
Then we would escalate it. That's correct.
So in some cases, it's preemptive as far as adding it to the formulary if you've already reviewed it. If made that
Correct.
determination, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
for sure. Right. So now I want to move into some recommendations for the plan design changes. We've took a look at your plan against other constitutionals, other counties in Florida, and what we found is that your plan was extremely rich. Your premiums were low comparatively to most of the other groups within the state of Florida. And so in order to help reduce some of the costs, we are recommending making some plan design changes. These are still within very competitive nature compared to what we see out in the marketplace right now. Most employer groups, both in a governmental as well as in regular lay employees, you're going to see very similar type programs. I still would actually say it's probably a little rich compared to what we would see. We would recommend that we would move your deductible from $500 to $1,000. Your out-of-pocket maximum, we recommend to increase that by $500 from $4,000 to $4,500. Increase your primary care physician copay by $10, so it would go to $35. We would leave your specialist copay alone at $60. Urgent care center would go up by $10 to $75, and the emergency room would go up to $500. Now, $500 is still pretty low for an emergency room visit, just so you know, but by law, if it's a copay, we cannot have it be less than $500 when there's not other programs available. So that's really the highest that we can put that. There's also some changes recommended for out-of-network benefits as well. If you make these plan design changes, we estimate about 7% reduction in your claims cost. That comes out to about $452,000, give or take, based on the time frame when I actually looked at these. So we also are going to recommend making some changes to your employee and employer costs, increasing those. I'll show you in the next couple of slides what the history of these costs have been over the last few years. The fully insured equivalents actually do go down for the upcoming plan year. We had a pretty significant bump last year. The plan ran a little better than the actuary expected, so we're able to reduce those for those retiree and COBRA rates. Your employer contribution, we're recommending a 15% increase, so that would go from $988.75 per month to $1,137.06. The way you fund is the same amount for every single employee, no matter which tier they're enrolled in. And then we also recommend increasing the employee contributions by 15%. These are still extremely competitive rates for employee premiums for all of the tiers. I don't know of another group out there that has a rate anywhere near as low as this. So very, very competitive out there. This generates approximately $606,000 of revenue per month additional, total revenue per month. So this would give us an additional $914,000 based on the current enrollment in the plans. I mentioned that I would show you a history. This kind of gives you an idea. We have not increased the premiums for the employees since 2016, which is very unusual. And with the exception of last year, we had not increased the county premiums or contribution since 2016 either. We are still, with this increase, at or close to where we were back in 2006, which is fantastic. Health insurance trend is over this whole period of time has been between 10 and 15% every year. So we would have expected your costs to have been going up by that kind of amount every single year, and you guys really have been able to maintain your contributions pretty steady throughout that time, and unfortunately it kind of just caught up with us over the last couple of years. So just to kind of summarize, we had a deficit in 2020, that would be the 2020-2021 plan year, of over $1 million. Last year, we had a deficit of $672,000, and so far this year, we're also at a deficit of $1,093,000. By making the contribution increase of 15% on both employee and employer, it gives us an additional $914,000. Plan design changes gives us about $452,000. And then renewing that contract with Optum gives us a savings of about $200,000. Where we will end this year, I'm just not sure. You know, I did the claims data 2 months ago, and we were in the $400,000 upside down range, and now we're on over $1 million. So it can happen very quickly. One individual has a pretty high claim, and that can really throw us off. Okay. Any questions on any of that before I move on? Yes, sir.
I don't know if it was covered in here, but how has the elimination of the sheriff's employees affected the experience and the outlook moving forward?
It hasn't really made a significant difference. It's hard to identify. I can identify their claims versus the other as group as a whole, but there isn't a significant difference, increase or decrease either way on the claims experience. So I can't really tell you it's been a good thing or a bad thing. It has been one positive thing that I would say is that the insurance carriers did not increase our premiums, in essence. So the amount that we pay to Florida Blue, as an example, to administer our claims did not get increased. The amount that the life insurance carrier has charged did not get increased. And that would have been expected in a different situation where we lost a third of the group, in essence. But they did decide not to do that because we had already made all of the arrangements at that point in time. And so we were locked in.
But our deficit, the current deficit is based on a significantly fewer number of employees.
Yes, so the deficit is based on your actual claims versus the funding amount that's coming in this year. We did not anticipate, obviously, when we did the calculations last year, that we would lose a third of the group. So whether those employees were healthy or unhealthy, I can't really tell, but obviously we have reduction in the number of amount of claims. We're still dealing with some run out from them. So claims that happened prior to their leaving the policy. But other than that, it should basically balance out with the exception of that run out because of the way the actuary calculates those.
Well, call me skeptical because we're going to have a third fewer people, but our deficit is what it was 2 years ago with more people, so.
Yeah, it's based on the actual claims. It's not based on what's the word I want to use? It's not a fully insured program where the insurance carrier is saying, this is how much you're going to pay. But one individual definitely makes a bigger impact when you won't have a third of the less people, which is part of what's happened so far this year with that one individual that's hit.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Right. Then the next thing I wanted to mention is the clinic. One of the things that we are recommending with the clinic is that we implement a program for mental health services or add mental health services to the clinic. I'm sure you are all well aware of the mental health crisis that's going on in the nation right now. There's been a huge spike in utilization for mental health services. This is during and after COVID, it's continued, and it really has made it very tough for anybody to go and get mental health services out in the community. There are very few doctors that are basically handling those types of services, so it's really tough to get in to see a provider, that type of thing. There is a recommendation that the clinic is making to add mental health services. We would basically convert one of the existing rooms in the building to focus solely on mental health services. We'd probably put a couch in there, make it a comfortable area for them. And then we would be able to bring in a mental health provider to handle those particular services. There's a couple of options. If we put in a full-time resource, it would cost us about $140,000, but it would support about 1,500 appointments. And then there's an option for a part-time resource, 3 days a week, and that would project about $100,000 in annual cost and support about 900 appointments. This would obviously enhance the option or the ability for members to get this type of service because they're going to be able to get in much more quickly and be able to see a consistent provider. And there would not, as a reminder, anytime somebody goes into the clinic for a service, there is no claim that is paid through your medical plan. So we could potentially see some reduction in the cost through your health insurance plan for these mental health services, which is a really great thing.
So the full-time, that would be an MD?
They are, I don't know if they are an MD, but it would be a full-time provider. They are specialized, and I don't know, Anita, do you know what kind of provider it is? I don't know if we know what kind of provider that would be. They'd be going through the hiring process, and we'd be able to look at different options for hiring a provider at that point in time.
Do we know how much we have history on what we're spending on for mental health expenses?
Well over $100,000. Yeah, mental health services are a pretty good chunk of your claims, for sure.
And just the exposure we have with the EMS and fire services folks is significant.
Yes, being able to help them get in, to be able to see somebody when they actually need to be able to see somebody is well more valuable than anything else that we can talk about. Yep.
Just maybe if we went to the full-time, maybe that person could do, when available, some additional services, or would they be forced, they could only do mental?
They would only be mental health.
Okay, there's no way to.
Their focus would
okay.
be mental health services. That would be their specialty.
Okay, so
I
there's no way
am-
to get an advantage of having,
I will tell you, I do not think we will have any trouble
okay.
filling a full-time set of appointments, just based on what I see out there.
How do you base that? I mean, what factual data do you use to project that we will need a full-time?
We actually can pull the claim information out of the health insurance plan to see how many services have been provided and things of that sort.
Can you get that to us?
Absolutely. Yeah, I can
And
get
is there-
that.
is there a-
However, I do want to caveat with that, that's how many are currently being seen. There are probably at least that many people who haven't been able to get in because they can't get an appointment with somebody. It's just tough right now to be able to get in to see mental health providers.
Is there a hybrid option that includes telehealth as a mental health on a telehealth basis and then supplement it with, have we looked at that?
Yeah, we can actually, I believe that the clinic did, I apologize, this is not my forte. I handle this piece of it, but I haven't been involved in quite the whole expanse of how they're going to do it. But I do know that we did talk about telehealth and in-person visits, both. So yes, I do think that there's an option for that.
We can flesh that out as well.
Yep, absolutely.
And I was actually going to say, I noticed on this plan, it's my first year on this plan, that we do not have telehealth covered, which I was surprised to find out, because you can see a lot of specialists without having to wait for an appointment that way, and, pediatricians, cardiologists, et cetera. That would be my question, just like him, is are we going to look at adding telehealth as an option for the employees? And then two, could it not, the mental health piece be, subsidized through a telehealth program instead?
Yeah, so you're talking about teledoc.
Yeah, like a
And that
teledoc.
is not specialist type services. That is really just more of an emergent type situation most of the time.
I used it this week for a dermatologist. So
yeah.
there is specialists now, they load it onto the program.
So there's an additional cost that you would pay to Florida Blue per person per month. And then you'd also pay a per claim fee for that. With the clinic, it's not been something we've actually needed because the clinic gave people that option for same-day appointments. Obviously not over a weekend, but that's been kind of the reason that teledoc wasn't implemented here. It wasn't implemented when it was originally put with Florida Blue and has just never been added. But if you'd like to look at that further, we can definitely get you the costs associated with that.
Okay, but at least should have numbers that as an option versus the clinic as an option on what the
Yeah,
the
so
premium
mental
is for
health,
having the-
mental health is not something that could be done through the teledoc program per se, because that's not going to be the same provider on a regular basis, whereas the clinic would provide somebody the ability to see a mental health professional, the same person on an ongoing basis to get the services that they need. So it's a little bit of apples and oranges.
Yeah, how do we get telehealth in general covered by the plan?
Yeah, like I said, there's an
yeah, 'cause
additional
you can
cost.
get
We can
mental health
definitely
through-
give you some ideas on the the additional cost
Yeah,
there.
because teledoc versus telehealth, I think he's more like telehealth, because there are all kinds of, services out there, that mental health online, et cetera, but we don't cover it, apparently.
And that's
it's
not
telehealth.
unusual for a lot of plans that are self-funded because there's not as many controls in those virtual situations.
In our clinic, we have same-day service now.
We do. Now that we no longer service the sheriff's office, we didn't have to increase the number of hours, and we are running at around 80%, 85% utilization at this point in time. So people should be able to get in for same-day service or next day at the latest.
Good, thank you.
All right, next up is dental. So your dental so far this year is running upside down almost $6,000. Last year we ended the year upside down $13,500, and the year before upside down $18,847. This is an employee paid benefit, so we want to make sure that we have enough money coming in into the plan from the premiums to cover the expenses, and having 3 years in a row upside down has made it so that we need to increase those premiums again. Yes.
So between the trend between the health insurance and dental is running significant deficits. So is that coming out of the reserve that we've built up? And in both instances, so those are trends we're trying to stop through the 15%, and so that we're not continually eating away at reserve. And is reserve balance healthy as it is? Okay,
No.
so we're
the
kind of
reserve,
mandated to have to build back up reserve.
That's correct.
After 3 years of deficits, and not much of a change in the plan fees.
that's correct. Yeah, so last year at the end of the plan year that we ended September 30th of 2022, we do a report for the state every year called the 11208. That report basically tells us if you have enough money in the reserve account to pay what we call the IBNR, which are claims that are incurred but not reported, and about a 60-day surplus. When we did that report last year, you basically were at that level, and that was it. There was no additional reserves in that account. Now, we can pull money out of, it doesn't have to necessarily be earmarked for health insurance. The state will allow you to pull money out of a general fund or things of that sort, but we do need to build that reserve back up because it has basically been depleted. And so everything that we are dealing with for this calendar or this plan year is there isn't money in there.
It'll be harder to build with fewer employees.
Yes, it will be harder to build with fewer employees. So based on this, we do recommend, the actuary recommends a 5.7% increase. Your health or your dental premiums are still extremely competitive. Again, I have a plan that is identical to your plan for another employer group, and the family rate for that plan is $172. So yours at $97.74 is still very competitive. Your plan is self-funded through Florida Blue or through Florida Combined Life, and there is a renewal on the table for that contract with no increase to that admin fee for an additional 2 years. And again, that's great because we had a reduction in the number of members, and they did not increase that administrative fee. And then vision insurance, it should be in rate guarantee this year. It is fully insured, so we should not see any increase in the premium for your vision coverage for the upcoming year. I believe this is the last benefit to talk about, and that's life insurance. The life insurance is in rate guarantee, but we wanted to talk a little bit about some options for making some changes to your life insurance. Currently, you have a benefit of $15,000. For basic life insurance. This is the amount of coverage that's paid for by the company or by the county for each benefit eligible employee. $15,000 is very low. I don't have any other groups that are as low as that. We kind of benchmarked this again to see what was competitive, and most employer groups are doing something like a 1 times your annual salary. So we would recommend 1 times your annual salary. We recommend up to $50,000, and the reason that we recommend up to $50,000 is because anything over $50,000, you have to pay the employee has to pay taxes on the premium for the amounts over $50,000. So there's some additional administrative work that goes into it when you have that. So we recommend the 1 times your annual salary. This would increase the cost for the county by $9,700 a year. So it's a very minimal increase to provide a much better benefit for your employees that should hopefully be able to pay for the funeral and things of that sort. And then we also recommend a change to the child voluntary coverage that is available. Currently, we have a $2,000 benefit, and we recommend actually changing that to an option for employees to be able to choose $5,000 or $10,000. The $10,000 cost, just to kind of give you an idea, is $1.90 per month, and that would cover all of their dependent children up to the age of 26, regardless of whether they are students or not. So it's, again, very inexpensive, but $2,000 for a benefit is very low, and it really would not cover funeral expenses if heaven forbid, something happened to a child. So those are our recommendations on that. And that's, I believe, it.
On the life insurance, I mean, really, it's not life insurance, it's funeral service benefit. But I don't think our plans, as I recall, these group plans are not as competitive as you can get out on the market as an individual.
It depends. It's term coverage,
Right.
so it's usually less expensive than, it's going to be less expensive than a whole life product that might be out there on the marketplace. Sometimes you might be able to get term coverage out in the marketplace on a voluntary basis for less, but you also have a lot more stringent health condition issue to deal with. So your your life insurance on the voluntary coverage is guarantee issue. And we're really not talking about the voluntary life insurance. What I was recommending there was the basic life insurance that's employer paid, and there's no health questions for that. So if somebody is an employee here, they get that coverage no matter what their health conditions are.
So how does that compare to what we get inundated on the television with, $9.99 and you're set
Yeah.
for life or whatever? No medical, no nothing.
Yeah,
So
so-
does this, are we are we equal to that or better?
Probably as far as the cost to the county is concerned, it's probably about the same. It depends on and obviously it'll depend on the amount of coverage for each person. But the rates that you've got are very competitive on a group basis. Yeah.
I think it should, I don't know. I just think if an unhealthy person needs it, the option for optional coverage is there.
It is.
But a healthy person should go through the marketplace and private outside of this for their full.
Depends on their scenario, for sure.
their
There are
coverage.
definitely some limitations for the group policy. Group voluntary coverage, there's maximum amounts that they can get. The coverage is term coverage and would basically terminate when they leave the employer. So it depends. If the person is healthy and can get a better deal out there, that's great, absolutely. But it's an employee, the voluntary coverage is an employee paid piece, and they have the option to review that and make that decision.
Any questions, Commissioners?
I just go back to the clinic because I'm new and I don't know the whole history of the clinic. So I have questions about the clinic. So the clinic now takes in less people to see because we lost the sheriff's officers. And so now it's a same day kind of clinic, 5 days a week. So I think the last time you and I spoke, we were looking at like maybe 9 people a day attending the clinic, 9 to 14 for appointments. Does that sound
Do you
right?
know how many appointments that we have? Yeah, there's.
Yeah, I think it was 9 to 14. So the one thing I had asked, and this is my only question, is because I think that operation is running, about $1 million a year for that building, is I would have liked to have seen, if we look at it and say how many people present at the clinic, and then still go on to draw a claim for us for the same issue somewhere else within 2 weeks, so like what is the true benefit of the building and what is the true cost per visit of that building versus opting into a telehealth program instead?
Yeah, so it's really hard to identify that particular. I don't have claims through the clinic, so I have no way of knowing who's been seen at the clinic and whether or not they've incurred a claim through the plan as well. It's not possible because of HIPAA privacy law for me to be able to see that. But most people use the clinic as their primary care physician. So they do not have an outside primary care physician that they're going and seeing. They're having most all of their care done. Now, they may need to have a specialist that they might be seeing outside of the clinic, but most people that are being seen at the clinic regularly are being, that's how they're being done. It's being done.
The clinic is demonstrably less expensive than a telehealth program for a primary?
Well, telehealth is not going to cover anywhere near as many things as the clinic will. You cannot be seen in a telehealth visit for things that you have to have blood work done or lab work done. The clinic does lab work, and those types of services. So there's a lot more that can be done at the clinic than you would be able to have done in a telehealth service.
Chairman, when I'm available.
Go ahead.
Finish.
No, go ahead.
Just kind of, I don't use this because I'm retired military, but last year or the year before, I'm getting confused now, there was some thought of getting together with Palm Coast and they would open up their own clinic and somehow that was going to end up with some savings by having more people using this, something like that. Did anything ever come of that?
I don't know if did we have any further conversations with them?
It wasn't necessarily to
Right.
save money. It was at the time when the sheriff's office was on our plan and we had an issue with being able to get into the clinic. We talked with the cities. We looked at everybody's insurance last year. I know Brian, who handles the clinic piece, had given them a cost to do that. It's something that the city at the time opted out of. They currently use a provider. They use MediQuick as their clinic provider. It's not apples to apples, but MediQuick reserves so many appointments a day where their city staff can go in there. They're not seeing the savings that they had hoped to see, which is why they were looking at coming onto our model, which is where you do experience more of a savings. I don't know, I haven't heard back from the city of Palm Coast if that's something they're continuing to do. Like everybody, we evaluate our health care benefits annually, but I haven't received a request from them.
The reason I brought that up, maybe that would be a way of doing some comparisons. Okay.
Sorry if this throws another monkey wrench in, but I'm sitting here thinking, if the sheriff's office employees who use the clinic as their primary physician and no longer have that as an option, is there a potential for a fee-based option to have them opt in that you could present to the sheriff if those people wanted to continue that?
It would be my understanding, and I'd have to talk to Brian about it, but you would have to expand your hours, which is what we were looking at doing last year. There would definitely be an increase in operating costs.
We don't know until you know how many people are.
Well, we only know
potentially-
based on when they were using it previously, whatever that impact was, where we were already beyond capacity. We didn't have
Well, you
same
won't get-
day.
You won't get the same number, though.
You may or may not, but they would have to do a workup, and then they would have to get billed separately to be able to pay into it. And when we looked at doing it previously, I mean, they can't just use it without paying into it because it would affect
Right.
our plan. But
Right.
there was a way, and it was my understanding when we met with Brian last year, that even if the cities went on to use that same model, that they could charge per visit a certain amount, whatever that amount would be. But it would probably take an actuary and Brian and, somebody would have to come up with what that cost per visit would be that would have to be shared. But we would definitely have to increase the footprint of that facility and extend hours.
And one of the advantages that we had the conversations with the City of Palm Coast was that we'd be able to potentially use one of their facilities, their buildings, to expand the clinic if they did decide to add
There
in.
was some, I just. I
So that
can't
was
remember
part of
everything we
those
talked about,
conversations as well.
But that never came to be or
No.
not ongoing?
No.
Okay.
What is the industry wait time? I mean, is one day, same day, a luxury that we can't
For a
afford?
regular physician
No, for the clinic. Being able to come in same day.
is, Yeah, that's great. I mean,
It's better than
better than
that I'm doing.
when you're able
I
to,
get
what you're
too.
able to get into your regular physician right
You,
now.
you can't relate it to a walk-in clinic. It's a clinic that's like a regular physician. So you would normally schedule a regular physician's appointment several days out, but they do handle emergencies or not like a sickness or a
Yep.
flu or something like that on a walk-in basis whenever they can.
Yeah,
So it's kind of both.
They can actually, you can call in or log into the system and request an open appointment for the same day. And then we also, we're re-implementing, previously, we had a couple of appointments first thing in the morning and right after lunch that were reserved for walk-ins. And we are re-implementing those as well. So people will be able to have that literally walk-in option for those types of services as well.
The point I was just trying to make is with the cost, is a same-day clinic a luxury versus the next day?
The cost of a same-day or an urgent care center is probably about 3 to 4 times the cost of what you as an employer are paying towards for the clinic per appointment.
I don't know that I'm getting across my point. That's okay.
Yeah, so I think the one thing that would be helpful to have, just because I'm, again, new, on the clinic is what is the cost per visit and what's the savings to us by having the clinic? You know, what's the savings on the entire health program that we offer? What is the savings per visit as they went outside, of this clinic? And does it offset, the $1 million for the clinic?
Sure, absolutely.
Just because now we have even less people using it versus putting them into a telehealth program that relatively could, that's my question is if you're getting 14 visits per day and let's say it's a full 365, or not 365 times, the weeks, that's $297 a visit estimated that we're paying for
We
that
have
first to go to
some
the clinic.
annual reports that I think will help with that.
Yeah, that's
information.
my question is what is each visit costing and what's the savings to us overall? So if I put out $1 million, to run a clinic,
Yep.
and 5 to 14 people use it a day, and you even though you have HIPAA, you do know how many people go to it a day
Absolutely.
and what
I can tell you
services
how
they
many
get.
appointments there are and things of
Yeah,
that sort.
so then
Absolutely.
that's it. Like, what is the actual cost savings for the county to continue to implement a clinic versus expanding their benefits with a telehealth or
Yeah. It's a
or
little hard to
MediQuick?
identify specifically.
Right.
Because obviously, somebody in a urgent type situation may go to the emergency room, and that's going to be a very different cost than if they go to their primary care physician. But I can give you some idea of the difference in the cost per person, or excuse me, per
Visit.
appointment through the clinic versus the cost for a regular primary care type physician, cost for an urgent care, cost for a emergency room.
And then I would like to know how much adding a telehealth coverage would be, like a
I will
teledoc.
definitely get that cost for you as well.
Some of that cost is not quantifiable for you.
Nope.
Like, in other words, like time lost, what we're saving by having someone an employee go to the clinic here as opposed to going outside.
Yes, because there's no waiting at the clinic. So somebody walks into the door for their appointment, they literally don't wait. They go straight in, whereas I have waited hours at my doctor's office, so.
Yeah, I think we're providing a service with this clinic that you can't get anywhere else. I know
Exactly.
from personal, because I'm not in there, but if I want to see my doctor, it's 4 or 5 days.
Yeah. You're lucky if it's only 4 or 5 days. So,
That's nice, but that would be nice to have telehealth outside the clinic, whether, the clinics, it would be nice to see what telehealth would cost, because it's an instant, I want to see a doctor in 5 minutes, he's coming right through the computer.
yep,
So I
absolutely.
would like to know that.
I can get you that cost for sure. Okay, anything else? All right, so it looks like thanks. The number of office visits, I'm not sure the time frame. This was 2022. The number of visits that we had last year in 2022 was $4,865, and the cost per visit averaged out to be $95.84. I will tell you, the claim cost for a teledoc is $90. So that's the claim cost, plus you pay a per employee per month fee on top of that. So
I like
we're close.
I only brought up the teledoc because they now have expanded to let specialists, because it's really hard in Palm Coast to get to see
Yes.
any kind of
Yes.
specialist. So now that you can have that instant,
Yep, for
you know,
sure.
with your copay to see the specialist through telehealth, but we don't cover that at all.
Yeah, that's not unusual. It's pretty,
Yeah.
not something that's being covered quite as much as it was during COVID. Most plans were covering telehealth type services, virtual visits with your local physician, and it's not happening quite as easily now. So, but yeah, I'll get you the full cost of those for you. Any other questions?
Commissioners, anything else?
Nothing else.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Good to see you all.
Next is the budget discussion and presentation.
Well, thank you. Let's see if this works. Here we go. This is the agenda for today's budget discussion. We're going to go over each one of these in a little bit more detail. Just bear with me so I can bring it up on my screen. A large portion of today's workshop is going to be talking about your non-general fund budgets. There are some general fund items that are going to be sprinkled through this. I know that we just received the presentation on employee benefits. The important thing with that is we've got open enrollment coming up, so some of that is going to need to be decided on whether or not we're changing or moving forward with what we're proposing, so that the timing of that can be done. I believe it's in July, open enrollment, so we wanted to make sure that we brought that forward today. We are going to talk about capital improvement a little bit, so we will get started. So just to do a recap of the employee benefits, this does affect our general fund. So what we were proposing in this year's budget is that 15% increase to the employer and to the employee. That'll result in an increase to the fund in contributions of $914,000. Roughly, commingled with those plan design changes that Sherry has just covered for you. That's the changes in those copays, out-of-pocket expense. That is anticipated or expected to bring in a 7% reduction in those claims, which should equate to approximately $452. The Optum RX renewal, which is that piece that deals with our prescriptions, it is anticipated to have a contract saving of 18.37%. So when we look at that number, that's roughly about $200,000. I know Sherry talked about that vigilant drug list, which are those high-cost prescriptions, and trying to combat some of those costs so that we don't have those on our plan. And then the Price Edge prescription discount card, which would, it really promotes your generic drugs and would provide a discount. So those are some things that we're looking at rolling out. She did go over the dental and vision, which are employee paid. They are not subsidized by the county. So the vision, she stated, will remain the same. The dental is going to be seeing a 5.7% increase. But all of those changes that we were proposing were talked about with our constitutional officers, with the exception of the sheriff, who is no longer on our plan. So when you look at those design changes, the increase to contribution, you're looking at roughly about $1.5 million that'll go back into that insurance fund, which will help fill that gap moving forward. Then we took a look at that employee health clinic, and I was trying to find my email or a presentation that we had from Brian. I think his last name's Branham. He's the gentleman that runs the utilization reports for the clinic. We met with him early on when we talked about looking at that mental health provider piece for the clinic. And when I asked about, it's not just about the money, but what is the cost previously on claims? And from what I had written in my notes was last year's expense for mental health related services was about $220,000. The previous year to that was about $160,000. But it's more than just the saving the money. It's also trying to improve access for people that are on our plan to be able to get into somebody. So when we looked at that and we were looking at doing that full-time component, it was $140,000 is what that would cost us to have somebody there 5 days a week. We thought that that was probably a good starting point, just so that we could have enough available appointments. We have seen, as Sherry has stated, or as you read in other articles, mental health crisis is on the rise, and it's more than just about the money. It was improving that access. So that seemed to make a lot of sense for us to move forward with that. And then we also looked at that life insurance, and this is what the employee provides to the, or the employer provides to the employee. And we were proposing to do that increase from what we're currently providing to our employees, which is just the $15,000. God forbid, hopefully nobody has to cash in on this. But we are looking to be more competitive. And when you look at the market right now and the benchmarking, it shows that we're not really competitive with our life insurance benefits. I can tell you that when I worked in South Florida 30 years ago, they used to cover 1 time your annual salary. That was 30 years ago. And you used to have the option back then for a dependent child to either take out the $5,000 or the $10,000. We currently have $15,000 for life insurance, and your dependent child is capped at $2,000. That's all you're allowed to buy or get covered through this plan, unless you want to buy a separate life insurance policy. But again, trying to be competitive with the market. It's total annual increase to the county to have everybody on that's $9,700, which is insignificant. Like I said, hopefully nobody has to use this, but unfortunately we have had employees recently have to take advantage of that, and it's not enough to bury their child. So looking at the Florida retirement system, there were some proposed changes that came out of legislature this year, which shows an increase to our FRS rates. This is something that we monitored very closely. What they did opt for and what they passed, the governor still has not signed off on it, but it is an increase to FRS, which is just under 10%. I think originally we were thinking it was going to be somewhere around the 9. It's somewhere between 9 and 10, just under 10. So this is the estimated impact on the general fund. It's about $608,000 a year, and then $95,000 on the non-general fund. And then when we look at the COLA, last year we had updated our resolution, and we used the March number for the South Region Consumer Price Index, or CPI. Last year, though, we made a switch. We used the 12-month average, which was a 6.6% COLA increase. This year, what we were proposing to do is to not do the 12-month average, but to go to the year-over-year, which is 5.3. And I'll show you on the next slide, you'll see the difference in those two. But not that there's a right way or a wrong way, but it's just a comment. You know, I don't know if moving forward, this is something that we should do the average between the two, or should we do the lower of the two? But, you know, again, you'll see it on the next slide, what I'm talking about. So if you look at this CPI for the South region, all the way to your left was March of 2022. We used the gray line, which was the lower of the two. So that was the 6.6 that we used for the COLA. This year, instead of using that same line, which would have us at an 8% COLA, we're opting or recommending doing that 5.3. So I don't know if it makes sense year after year to be changing the resolution on which one of these we pick, if we just opt to go with the lower of the two, or do we do the average of the two, or what that looks like. So again, we're recommending that 5.3, which is the lower of the two, but it is different than what we did last year. And so the one item that we're going to talk about first right now is that health insurance fund. Our numbers don't necessarily correspond to the claim side because as claims are coming in, we're not seeing that impact in the same interval of time. It does catch up eventually, but we did build the budget looking at what you see here, the adopted of 23 and the tentative of 24. you're actually seeing an expenditure decrease in this fund, and that is with already including that mental health provider at 140,000. The reason why the fund is going down is because you're carrying less money forward every year in your reserve. As Sherry presented to you, it is estimated that we're going to have a deficit in this fund by year end. So we're already anticipating that we're probably going to need between 800,000 to 1.2 million added into this fund out of the general fund reserves to replenish and to cover current claim expenses to carry us through to make sure that we're able to cover that IBNR, or that incurred but not reported claims. However, those changes that we were recommending with the plan design, with the savings from the prescription, as well as the changes in contribution, we're hoping that all of those collectively will add about another 1.5 million into the fund. So moving forward, we shouldn't have to replug this fund. The other item that we had looked at was property insurance. And so when we did the review of our property insurance, and again, these are estimates that they provided to us. The final numbers won't be available until probably August, September timeframe. But we're working on the budget now, so we wanted to take an early look at these estimates. Our carrier for property insurance is estimating a $700,000 increase in all of our premiums on our property, which would take our expense from about $900,000 to a little bit over $1.6 million. That's that $700,000 increase. So staff, we've been meeting, talking about, what kind of reduction strategies can we do, and moving forward, what does this look like? One of the recommendations that we came up with was, much like the health insurance fund, was to evaluate the creation of a self-insured property insurance for the buildings that we would not insure. So we were looking at buildings that had a value of less than $1 million, that did not have any previous FEMA claims. And I referenced the FEMA claims because if we have a facility where we've had a FEMA claim, you have to insure it. You can't go back to FEMA and ask for money to fix that building, so you have to carry insurance. So we looked at that. We also looked at reducing the insurance on our contents and stuff that they call PETO, which is, I thought I'd remember this one, but it's property in the open, I believe is what it is. So like if you have fences, if you have maybe a generator, things like that. So we looked at reducing the insurance for contents and the property in the open. We also, by doing that, we thought that it would bring a reduction of the estimated increase, that 700,000, by making these changes. We can save an additional 500,000. So then that jump that we're going to see is not 700, it would only be 200. However, we needed to be able to create that internal self-insurance fund for that uninsured property. So we were proposing to take half of, I don't want to call it a savings, but half of what we would have spent and put 250,000 and start building up an internal reserve, much like the health insurance fund. This would be for property that we don't have insurance on. So I don't know if that makes sense to you, if you need me to clarify anything.
How many buildings do we have in that category? Under $1 million and never had a FEMA claim? Is there a lot of those?
Quite a bit.
Okay.
Yeah, quite a bit.
Going to use what Mr. Gardner's valuation.
No, the insurance company came out and actually did an evaluation of our property. They went out there with Samantha Whitfield to do an evaluation of all of our current policies and contents and property. Even based on the insurance company's numbers, I think some of them are low, but it's, better, I guess, than what we had. So we're taking it from the insurance company's standpoint.
Okay.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, that was my question. So these numbers about the 700K increase versus if we do these changes, that wasn't just, that was actually, you got together the insurance company
Yes.
to come up with those, okay.
Yeah, they did an evaluation of all of our property. It's something that they come out periodically and do. But based on that, again, this is an estimate. It could still go up between now and, say, August, September. But that's not uncommon. If you experience this at your house, I know our insurance on our home has gone up significantly over the last couple of years. So it's not, I guess, unanticipated, but we're just trying to manage that impact as best we can. So like I said, the strategy that we had come up with was to look at self-insuring facilities that are under $1 million. And by creating that, I guess, an internal fund to be able to cover those claims that you would have put in, and every year just build it up. In other words, you're just saving the money. You're not paying for the cost of the insurance. You're, controlling your own destiny there.
I would add, I think that's a shows promise, at least moving forward. I would hate to do that all at once, though. I think a phased approach, because it would, right, just be all our luck where we get rid of it in 1 year and then the big storm comes. So a phased approach might be better.
We have a lot of geographic dispersion on some of these buildings. So you have, a building out in Hawk Creek that might have a flooding exposure, but doesn't have, it may not have the same wind exposure as up in the hammock. So, and we have tons of buildings that are smaller, lower value buildings where, but, by doing the spreadsheet and lining it out on the expensive buildings like this one, obviously the high value buildings, this approach seemed to make a lot of sense.
Yeah, it does to me, too.
Would we be
I like this.
continuing to insure buildings where we know we have damage if there's storms, like he brought up Hog Creek, or flooding, or would we just continue if they're under $1 million?
If you had a FEMA claim already, we have to insure them. But if, say you had a building beachside, and we'll pick a park somewhere beachside, just because if it gets damaged through a storm doesn't mean that you can't go to FEMA and put in a claim. It just means that if you've already made a claim, you have to continue to insure it. So it's not like you're going to be on the hook to cover a complete loss of a building that hasn't been hurt before. So, I mean, there is a certainty of risk, but it's whether or not, you're willing to kind of, manage that risk or that exposure. And we thought that by taking this approach, and we did look at proximity to whether it is wind or whether it's flooding, and a lot of the areas that are low-lying now, we can't get flood insurance on anyway, so we don't even have flood insurance. So, it's kind of just trying to manage that risk and kind of come up with the best approach, so. Next, we had shared with you previously our capital improvement program, but our capital improvement program is a planning management tool. We use it to create a 5-year plan. It covers any projects that we have that are above $50,000. On the IT side, the threshold's $10,000, and it has to have an asset life of at least 5 years or more. Preservation includes items that are, major repair or maintenance, things that are above $10,000. When you look at our current CIP, we've got a backlog of projects. I know on the 5-year plan, it's an average of about $2 million a year. The first year, I think it's a little bit over $2 million, but on average, it's like $10 million, maybe $10.2 million. We also have a backlog of unfunded new construction, which is upwards of $100 million. And again, I believe I already shared this with you, the funded and the unfunded. These are a list of some of those preservation items that we had on there that we were identifying for next year. And I can stop if anybody's got any questions. This is the remaining balance, which some of this is new construction. We have a grant, anticipated grant for the EOC roof to replace that. So that is split funded with a grant. We also have the Bull Creek Pavilion concession stand, which would be split funded with impact fees. And then some of your technology items that we have in there for IT. So when you look at the total general fund for next year, it's the 2.2 million, so it is a little bit over 2 million. The total, you got a little bit coming out of impact fees.
So that's our solution to Bull Creek, is build a pavilion and,
It's up to the board. That is something that we've heard from the community as something that they would like to see. When we talked about when I say concession stand, one of the options, or what this option is for, is really, they sell these unique, I want to call it a Connex box, but it is a Connex box that's equipped to be a commercial kitchen. And then you would, have that Connex box, you could put a roof over it, you could have a little porch, you could have, something like that, where you could have a concessionaire basically run, a small
It's like,
business.
what she showed me is like 40 by 16, almost imagine like semi-boxes or something, but they come prefabbed with a kitchen built out in it. And they're more resistant to the way they get strapped down or put down, more resistant to the flooding and the wind. But this would be placed back off the water, most likely.
It would be outside of the
Won't have
floodplain.
future damage. But it can be operated by a third party.
we'd have to go out with a
Right.
RFP and. have
Yeah, but
somebody
it would
come to-
get something back in the community right away. And then they would eat waterside per se, like at a pavilion. It's about the only, because it's so too expensive to build back in the place. And I'm not sure if the community, if the board would support putting back what we
Okay.
had before, but it does get them a
Something.
food stand back
Yeah.
out in there that can be
Okay.
operated.
All right,
Yeah, the total cost is $350,000, so part of it's coming out of impact fees, and then the other would be the general fund piece. And if our impact fees increase, then certainly we can take more from those. Again, this is just a picture in time right now, so we needed to put something together for the presentation and part of our strategy for next year, but definitely wanted to get it out there so that you could see that. Then we have the rolling stock replacement plan. This program provides for planned replacement of all fuel-consuming vehicles and equipment. Not just the equipment, but if they have any attachments or implements, things like that. For budgeting purposes, we do look at a 5-year plan. It is established for leased and purchased vehicles and equipment. So as you know, our lease program for vehicle replacement started in fiscal year '23, the current year. It does help us with some of those upfront costs of purchasing vehicles. It will reduce our maintenance costs because as we're getting newer vehicles, we're not holding on to them, we're not spending as much to replace them. And it does help with creating a more even budget as we, try to have, I guess, a more level budget. But then any of your specialty equipment, your large equipment, ambulance, motor graders, things like that, it is going to have to either be, if we can find a lease for those, or it'll have to be a direct purchase. But typically, out of the general fund, we look to spend about $2 million out of this fund. So your folks that are your non-general fund, they would have to make sure that they have enough in their enterprise fund to cover it. But the cost is running somewhere around $2 million a year out of the general fund, whether it's lease or purchase. The Technology Replacement Fund, this would be something new that we would be creating next year. We currently don't have a dedicated fund for this, but the purpose of that plan would be to ensure the timely replacement and implementation of technology, making sure that when it does occur that it's planned, it's funded, it's organized. The primary goal of that technology replacement plan would be to ensure that the core technology that's used throughout the county is able to meet the county's mission and necessary for the operation to occur in a regular systemic fashion. So what we were proposing is general revenues that we're getting in the general fund would be used to fund this IT replacement fund. It would be for a dedicated purpose. Once that money was in this fund, the only way to take it out of the fund would be through board action. But for next year, this is what we have in the budget, $290,000, and those are the items that we've identified. So we've got drone replacement, some of our standard computer replacement, switcher servers, and stuff like that. So
American drones?
American drones, yes, they have to be American.
Where will we find them?
Yeah, and over half the providers have gone out of business. It's going to be
It's a good business to go into.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, we found a company, actually, I think in Volusia County, that's got some pretty nice equipment, so I know that's what they were looking at. But this is a list of some of our non-general fund decision units. As you know, when we work on the budget internally, if somebody's asking for something new, anything above what their current base budget was, we're asking them to submit it in the form of a decision unit so that they could be evaluated, kind of weighted. Not all of these are funded. They are non-general fund, but in some cases, there's not enough money, and it would have meant that the general fund would have had to have subsidized it, or they would have had to switch priorities. The two on here that come to mind, cybersecurity, that is being updated for some pricing from the vendor. The CPR software, it was recommended that we take a look at Pulse Point. When we did that evaluation, I just didn't feel that there was enough return on the investment for what we were spending, and this fund is limited on how the money can be applied, so that's not one that we have funded for next year. I don't know if anybody has questions on any of these.
Didn't we just approve the ship administration software database? Isn't that what we just approved on the consent agenda?
I don't believe so. I don't know. I don't think so. When we go
Sounds
to
like
when we go to the slide for SHIP, it'll say if it's in the existing budget or not. We may have been able to shift that one if there was a savings now, which may have happened. But we'll take a look.
It's in the existing budget, yeah, yeah, but we had to approve it. It was.
Yeah, if they had
It was in the,
capacity, if they had capacity in their existing budget and they were asking for things, we asked them if they had a savings in this year, if it was possible for them to go ahead and secure it now, rather than shift that expense to a future year. So it is possible on some of these. I know when we met with the fire department, they had a savings on something. We asked them to go ahead and buy it now, as long as it doesn't exceed their current budget, so it's possible. This is a look at your county transportation trust. This is formerly the 102 fund. This is what your public works, your road and bridge folks cover. This is their operating, personnel, capital, a little bit of debt service on some of their equipment. You do see the reserves going up a little bit over the next year. So this budget is increase of the 8.27%, but that's largely the reserves that are going up, so. Then if you look at the constitutional fuel tax, this is the 112 fund. This is a fund that has been used for local match. Oh, I'm sorry, I got the wrong. Clicked it twice. Sorry about that. Your constitutional fuel tax is the one that had been used previously for your road projects for a local match. So right now, you do not have funding coming into this particular account. It's been moved into the 102, which is the previous one, the operating for your public works folks. As you know, why isn't that one going? I don't know why. I don't know. Do you have the most recent one updated? I don't know. We updated this one, so let me see if
It's okay.
I think we have it.
We have it.
We have
We
it.
have
I have it on yours. So this one might not be the most up-to-date.
Looking at it.
This one isn't, I know. I don't know if maybe you can just take a look real quick, maybe. We'll take a look real quick. We did move the order of some of these around, so I know that the constitutional fuel tax had been moved up just to follow suit with the other folks. So I apologize for that. That brings up, or I can probably, you have it on the handout. So the constitutional fuel tax, it's only about $258,000. You'll see the bulk of it sitting in reserves. However, there's not money coming into this. This is what's being used to support your folks in public works. And then you've got your special assessment for your Daytona North. That area is where we collect that front foot assessment. That 58 cents per front foot has not been increased since 1993. It's currently not generating enough funding to support the services that are being provided out there. So essentially, indirectly, this area is being subsidized with gas tax, which is causing the deficit or the need to shift that other funding over to Public Works in the 112. But in order to maintain current service levels and to be able to continue to have adequate reserves, we're recommending that that front foot assessment actually be tripled. It has not increased in over 30 years. So if you think about having an increase, in 30 years, you're tripling it. So we're looking at doing a front foot assessment of about $1.74.
So I have some questions about this.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So my question to you is, the tripling of this assessment is going to what? Give them the same level of service that they're getting now, correct?
Correct.
And there was, I mean, I have a difficult time tripling the cost of that in an area where really our affordable housing and our low to moderate people community is in one of the highest inflationary periods. Is there a way that, is the calls what driving is the calls and complaints about the roads what's driving the cost to continue the maintenance, or is it just in general? Like if we just did the baseline maintenance that we would typically do without the calls?
You can't keep up because the cost of operating has increased over a 30-year period. So to be able to provide the current level of service, which is what's being provided to maintain the roads in a safe condition, it has to be tripled unless you want to subsidize it with some other means. You've exhausted your gas tax. We have no matches for road projects, for public works maintenance or for engineering. So if we are, you're pointing, or did you want to speak?
Yeah, when you're done.
Oh, okay. So the only way to come up with another mechanism would be to designate or dedicate some other funding that would help subsidize your public works folks or your maintenance. It's my understanding that this area of development is something that had gone through the court system and the county did not take ownership of the roads. The county, through, I believe, a court decision, allowed them to continue to develop, but established that they needed to pay for whatever that cost was to maintain, which they're not paying. So the board could do what the board chooses to do, but
We should have been implementing along an adjustment to this assessment fund. Are there other assessment funds in the county, special assessment?
there
funds?
are. They're coming up next.
Oh, they're coming up? Okay.
Yep.
We have several.
Commissioner Dance, did you have something?
You have some properties out there that have extensive frontage on two roads. So corner lots are going to have a long side and a short side. So how will that
We looked
work?
at them when we were doing the budget, and I don't know why, on those corner lots, and I could probably pick out a couple of them, they're being charged whatever the shortest piece was when we started looking at them. They're not being charged for both. So I don't know if that was the intent of the work, but when we started looking at the different parcels out there that were on corner lots, they're not necessarily picking up the both. They're not connecting both. I think it goes by what road address it has as a property address and not picking up both, if that makes sense. But it is something we looked at when we were trying to determine what kind of an impact are you going to have on these folks.
Right, the standard lot is roughly 170 feet based on the property appraiser, so it's like $100. Is that an annual cost if you multiply that per the lineal foot?
It was, and I don't know if Brian recalls or Jorge, but it was, I think it ranged from like $85 or something like that. It wasn't quite 100. Some of them,
Yeah,
they
it's
used,
just, I'm just rounding up.
yeah, they used a smaller amount, but essentially. yeah.
annual, that's their
That's
annual-
an annual cost, is like $85.
So
is
they'll
what
go
they're
from
paying.
100 to 300 under the scenario.
Yes.
unless there's a phased in or a staggered approach.
That's what I would, maybe we could talk.
Implement it
about
over
in the-
2
in
years or
future,
3
like
years
a
or something,
phasing
but
in rather than laying it, because the trash has gone up, you know, and what's not going up is people's pay.
okay, thank you.
Yep. So this is tourist development. This is their capital project fund. As you know, TDC is made up of 5% or 5 pennies. This particular fund, which is for capital projects, receives 20% of that revenue that comes in from TDC. They do have a large reserve for their capital projects. When you look at what's sitting out there that makes up that reserve balance or the tentative for next year, you've got 1.6 million earmarked for that experience center, which will be right there near the base of the new bridge on 100. And then you've got 740,000 that had been earmarked for grants. Those are the type of grants that they give out. I believe it's every other year that they do these grant opportunity. Recently, they did the one with Palm Coast for the tennis center expansion. And then you've got the rest being held in reserves, which is about 2.5 million for next year's budget. This budget is an increase of 30%, a little bit over 30, but largely it's all going into reserves. And then you've got your tourism. This is your main account, your promos and advertising. This is where you've got your personnel. This particular fund receives 60% of the funding. Personnel and operating is increasing slightly by about $30,000. And then your reserves are actually going down a little bit. So in this fund, you've got a decrease of about 4%. This is the other TDC account. This is for your beach restoration or the 111 fund. This is the one that was moved under the board's purview. We just report back to the TDC on how the money's being spent. This has been used to support your beach restoration efforts, and this particular fund receives 20% of whatever they collect. This particular one is only going up by about 1.87, largely going into reserves.
Can you go back one?
Mm-hmm.
So personnel, does that include economic development, or is that prorated?
Economic development is its own fund. This is just tourism.
Okay.
So your folks in TDC that work there, not economic development, they're in general fund.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. This one we already covered, that's your beach restoration. Then this is your municipal services. This is your planning and zoning, your code enforcement. You do have an increase in the budget for this one. They did present 2 decision units as part of this. They've got a code enforcement inspector. Right now, we've only got 1 individual who does code enforcement. That's Scott Simon. This would be adding an additional inspector. That 109,000 is not salary. It's a combination of salary, vehicle, computer, stuff like that. And then you've also got planning and zoning, adding an additional half of a planner into this fund. So this budget, what you're seeing there, the increase is the showing them funded. So that's why you see an increase of that 13%. These are all self-funded as enterprise funds. This is your building department, which shows an increase of your a little over 13%. The biggest increase is probably going into reserves. This is your E911, which is generated based on charges on your phone lines that go in to support this fund. There has been some considerable movement within the fund, reallocating money between categories, having to shift people out of this fund so that we could maintain within that budget that we have. There were a couple of decision units that we talked about. Previously, that cybersecurity software, we were waiting on the contractor or vendor to update that price. We also did not look to fund that CPR software called Pulse Point. That's not something we chose to fund. And then we did add a GIS specialist that would help with this E911 fund. This is your public safety communications network. This is our current radio system. When you look at the expenditures in this account, they are trending down, a little bit coming out of reserves and a little bit of the cost of personnel that are actually working on this system going up. But overall, it is a decrease of about 3%.
I guess just a quick question on that fund. Would this include, are we bringing in any revenue for other systems using our towers, renting space on our towers, that kind of thing? Is any of that happening?
I don't know if that revenue is coming into here. I got a thumbs up from Brian, looks like a little bit. The biggest change in this public safety communications network is the cost that the municipalities were paying into it. This is a fund that had been subsidized by the county to the cost of close to $2 million. When we looked at those agreements and we put the cities on notice last year, and then this year, it came out during the budget cycle that their increase would be given to them this year, that we could no longer afford to continue to subsidize that. You will see an increase on the revenue, but that's different than like the folks that are renting tower space.
So, have we been able to rent any of the tower space?
Yeah.
You
Didn't
can,
answer the question.
just
You
very
haven't done
little. Your revenue's not very much on them. So you do have some clients who are on the tower, but it's not generating a ton of revenue.
We do get revenue from the one over on Colbert, though, I know that. But that's not one of these, that's not a public.
No, that's got to stay in Graham Swamp, I believe. The one that's on the Graham Swamp property stays within that property. That brings up the airport. Overall, it's a decrease in the airport, largely from the reserves. They've got a lot of projects going on, so they are using some of that funding. They did look to add a decision unit to lease a vehicle, so we did look at funding that. Overall, it is a decrease of almost 15%. This is your residential solid waste, which is our Waste Pro contract. You do see the expense going down a little bit. Again, largely it's your reserve expense that you're seeing go down. And largely that's because the current contract that you have, the only way that we're able to capture this money for service is through the tax assessment. And that's one time a year. And when we were in limbo, I'll say, between contractors, and we used to piggyback with Palm Coast, the waste hauler had increased the rate mid-contract. I shouldn't say mid-contract, but they increased the rate, but it was mid our collection period, so we weren't able to capture that cost. Palm Coast goes out and they put it on your water bill every month, where we rely on that one-time collection. So we've been subsidizing the cost to the consumer, and it's been coming out of the reserves. That's why you're seeing the reserves in this fund go down. The reserves also help cover the cost of storm-related debris that is not funded through FEMA, which would have required the general fund to provide funding on that piece of storm debris. And so that's another area where.
Just a question on that. So when we get the one-time money for the solid waste, do we go back and remember how much we took out of reserves and replenish the reserves for that amount?
You can't. When I
But
talk.
do we do that?
You can't. When you're not going to replace the reserves in this fund. When you look at assessments, it's my understanding, what I was told by Sean Moylan was that you cannot create an assessment for a service that they've already received. So you're not going to be able to go back and go to those customers and say, you owe me X for for services we've already provided. That would be the only way you're going to replenish the reserve.
So the money, when it comes in at the one time each year, that just goes into the general fund? Is that what happens?
It's held in a non-general fund. It's separate account. It's in this fund here, the 405. It is completely segregated, but it is used to provide services that are related to those folks that are generating or paying into it, which is where we used it to offset their debris pickup or current services. It's money that could come back to the general fund and has in the past come into
I'm
the
just saying,
general
you're taking
fund.
it out of reserves, but
It's
we're
a-
not getting replenished. It's not being replenished.
It's a reserve within its own fund. So this is not part of your general fund reserve.
It's not coming out of the general, on our regular reserves. It's just coming out of.
The
these
reserve for this fund.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. I just.
This is our SHIP program, our State Housing Initiative Partnership. Okay, so you did talk about the counseling services software. That's the one that says on this screen already in budget. And then the other two, it looks like were funded, the conference and then the software database. So this is the budget for next year. When you look at the grant and aid, up to 10% of the grant can be used for personnel costs. So you are seeing a shift from the adopted 23 into the tentative of next year in the category of personnel. That helps us reduce the amount that we're having to pay for out of the general fund. So it's just shifting some of that management of these grants into the fund that pays for them. Overall in that program, though, you are seeing 17, almost an 18% reduction. Then you've got your court technology fund. These revenues are generated from court doc stamps used to support our court technology. It's part of Article 5. Internally, we work with all of these entities, all of these agencies to help identify how the money will be spent. We've got regular meetings and we talk about what their needs are, and then a large portion is held back into reserves, which allow it to build up over time. So if we have to change out, major technology equipment in the courthouse, we've got a reserve to tap into rather than coming back to the general fund. So that's what you're seeing there. Then you've got your law and legal funds. These come in the way of ticket surcharges, forfeitures, seizures, also any fees imposed by the court, things like that. That's what makes up the funding for these different accounts. We do have a decision unit in the court facilities account, which is that 108 fund all the way to the right. And that's to replace one of the VAVs or variable air boxes as part of the HVAC system over in that building. This is a continuation of law and legal funds and their various uses. Again, they're all designated for distinct reasons, and so we just work with those entities to manage those. These are those special assessments. So I believe it was Commissioner Pennington had asked if we had other assessments out there. The Espanola and Rima Ridge are two that we have on here for mosquito control. And those will fall off once mosquito control brings them online, and then they'll just collect them separately. It won't run through us as a means of paying for that service. That North Malacompra drainage, that's covering the maintenance within that area up in the hammock. And then Bimini Gardens, similar to Daytona North, they pay in to cover any road work within that area. These are some of the other special assessments that we have. These are your new recreation impact fees broken out by what district they're in.
Heidi, don't we have a ongoing special assessment in Marineland Acres?
That should be the North Malacompra drainage, as far as I know. That's your,
That's where that is?
yes.
Okay, great, thanks.
Yeah, I don't know if we have that one on here. This is your impact fees for your parks. It's also got your library trust impact fees on here. These are your new ones that are coming in. These are your old park impact fees, broken out by zones, and we look to use this money up first when we apply some of those projects. This is your transportation impact fees based on the location or district of where those are at. This is your public safety impact fees. And when you look at these, the Palm Coast, we had an arrangement with Palm Coast where they were going to pay them monthly. Due to the timing and the cost that it would take, they're allowed to recoup an administrative cost. Rather than do it monthly, they asked if they could just remit quarterly to help reduce some of that overhead administrative cost. In other words, it returns more money to us. So when you look at the amount for law enforcement, I don't know that it's telling of all of the money collected, as some of it may not have been handed over from the city. And that's true with the EMS, since we are the sole EMS provider in the county. The fire rescue is something we collect, so that one is higher.
I'm sorry, what does the $100 mean?
That's the money that's in there. It's probably to pay for audit services.
And that's just per year, $100.
That's what is part of the budget. So when you have your Riggs and Ingram that come in and do the audit, each one of your funds has to pay into that audit. So that's just an arbitrary number that runs in your operating to help provide those professional services to that fund. Mainly, they're being held into the reserves until they're needed for something. These are a combination of all your landfill funds. We do have two employees that work in this fund. Largely, money is sitting in reserves. It is restricted on its use and nature, so they are kept separate. Then you've got your debt service funds, and really as you look through this, you'll see that we have the annual debt service payment. Many of these have at least 1 month of reserves to cover the annual debt service payment. That's just really good business practice. It is something that may be required on some of these that are bonded because it does provide stability on those that are covered through a bond. We do not have a bond on the Sheriff's Operations Center, which is that fourth column all the way over. So you're not showing any in reserves. We only collect what we need there. Then you've got your housing fund. These are grant programs that are managed by SHIP. Some of these are a little old. Your ESL funds, very little in the operating, again, largely being held in reserves. You've got two different ones here. Your 117 is the old money, and the 119 being the new money that's being collected. So I believe we're working on an agenda item in that 117 fund that'll exhaust that fund, so we can kind of close that one out, and then we'll just have the 119 moving forward. This is the Utility Authority Economic Opportunity. So when you look at that Utility Regulatory Authority, that's a very old account used to oversee our utilities. And then you've got that economic opportunity, again, small amount running through your operating. That is funding that is remaining, that's committed to a local business you had through your economic development office. You had some incentives that were being provided to a local business. I believe it's Goya Sales. That's the remaining money that we have owed to them for next year. And then you've got your grant funds, and this is kind of a myriad of different grant programs that we have. Your Section 5310 covers your transportation buses, Your State Homeland Security grant is partly IT, partly EM. These other ones, EMPG, EMPA, are EM. You've got the FEMA and SAFER grant and HAZMAT, which is fire rescue. The one really to pay attention to or notice is the FEMA SAFER grant. That SAFER grant, as you know, is for the salaries of our firefighters. That grant does run out in March of 2024. So the general fund will be looking to pick up the remaining balance moving forward. So it'll be a little over a half a year expense, and then moving forward, it'll be the full expense. And then we just have the next steps, which really we've got 2 more planned meetings. Our next workshop is going to be on June 12th, which is going to be an opportunity for your constitutional officers to come forward, present their budgets to you. And then we've got the June 19th workshop, which is when we're going to take a look at the general fund. I did mention this morning at our meeting that the preliminary estimate of value was provided to us last week, so now that we have that preliminary number, we continue to work towards the general fund budget. We'll get our official number July 1, so we look to sometime between probably that June 19th and July 1, we have to fine tune that and come back, so I don't have the date for that workshop yet, but that's pretty much it. I don't know if you all have questions.
A lot of information.
Yep. It's a lot.
A lot to cover, so.
Yeah. Any other questions, commissioners?
Well, just going back to the beginning, how critical is that number we're going to use for the cost of living increase to, in other words, you were saying in the beginning it was going to be like 5.1 or something?
5.3?
5.3.
Is that becomes a real important number when you're looking at the edges of the budget, whether it's 5.3 or a little less, a little more. Just so, I guess my question, just in general, does that look like a reasonable approach? That 5.3?
Well, at the time, we didn't have a estimate of value, so it's really kind of hard because you're dealing with unknown numbers that you don't know what that's going to look like. Last year, when we looked at the CPI and what we were potentially recommending as a COLA increase, we went with the lesser of the two. Well, this year, that line isn't the lesser of the two, it's more. So now we're switching once again, and that's the difference between the 12-month average or year over year. So really, I mean, there's a lot of unknowns, and until we can really fine-tune what the needs are to move forward, it's kind of like backing into a millage rate because you only want to levy what you need. So it's really taking a look at what the constitutionals have proposed, what our staff is proposing, what our commitments are. The first thing that we have to do is plug our reserves. So that's the first thing that we do, and then we take a look at everything else after that. So that's why it's important that when budgets are being submitted, they're being submitted with the backup documentation as to the need, so that we can kind of evaluate what those needs are. So
I think you kind of have to go with the lesser of the two, and then you have options to go up if needed. But going back more years, have you looked at what rate was used going back even farther?
some years there wasn't any rate, it was just whatever.
Even with inflation?
There were other challenges, I think, where maybe the alternative was to keep medical flat and the county bear the burden of cost, or there were years, I think, when FRS went up, and so the county, did that. Internally, we don't really have a step plan or a merit plan. So the only folks that have that on our side are your firefighters, because they have a collective bargaining agreement, right, similar to law enforcement. There's things that I think that we should try to do, but I don't know funding-wise whether or not we can afford to do them. So, I mean, there's years, I don't know if I answered it, but there are years that I've worked here that, maybe we didn't get a raise or you got a lump sum. You got $500 lump sum. It wasn't even added to your salary where it went up every year. So it's not really, there's not really a good history to go back and look because they never really did that. I mean, they've used a lot of different methods when they tried to determine that, so
So you're going to build the budget with a 5.3 number?
we are.
Okay. Any other questions? All right, let's move on to the collective approach discussion.
So that item came up at a request from the city of Flagler Beach. They had asked if we could establish 2 people from the Board of County Commission that would meet to talk about an issue. We're supposed to identify an issue to bring forward for discussion. They've identified a day and a time. And so really this meeting now, or this opportunity, would be to come up with what is our one issue. We've heard from them that their issue to the cities and the county is that they feel that people come into Flagler Beach and use their city and are impacting their city, but the city of Flagler Beach isn't getting a direct benefit of having them come there. It's actually degrading their infrastructure, and they would like to ask us all to pay into helping them support their infrastructure. So that's the conversation I had with their interim city manager. I think that our most pressing issue with Flagler Beach is probably the beach. There are things that we do as a county that help support them. Just from a staff level, I know our county attorney's office and county attorney and our engineering office and county engineer have helped them immensely with, beach renourishment efforts. Our engineering staff has even been involved in looking at the pier and evaluating contracts and specs on rebuilding their pier. I know our emergency management director has, been helping them through the recovery efforts. So it's not that we're not providing assistance. I mean, I could go through a list of county staff that provide assistance on a regular basis, but they're looking for financial commitment to them. Currently, we provide funding for lifeguards. You have an agreement with them that has a CPI clause in there where it does provide for annual increases. It's the only area in the 18 miles that we pay for lifeguards. We don't have lifeguards anywhere else other than within their CRA area of Flagler Beach. They would like to see an increase there. They would like to see an increase into other funding. So I think our big topic with them is probably going to be the beach.
Just for instance, the TDC, we did a pretty good analysis of that last year. They get more money back than they pay into the TDC, and I think Amy had some good detailed information on how much that is.
She did, and my memory is somewhere like around $500,000 that she's invested into promoting tourism in that community. I know that the businesses and the folks that work in that industry greatly appreciate it, but I think that there are other folks in the city who feel like maybe the promotion of their community is not what they want, and it's now creating an impact to infrastructure. So I guess it's trying to find that happy balance or that middle of the road.
We provide even more. I mean, we're doing the FDOT project that is beneficial to Flagler Beach also. I mean, we're doing a lot for that beach and that road.
We are. There's a local match on their segment that's $16.78 million.
That we're going to pay.
That requires a local match. So we're leveraging a combination of funding that we've committed to doing that covers their city, as well as working the relationships and getting funding from FDOT but it's funding that we're getting from FDOT that could be applied elsewhere in the county. And when you look at the commitment that we have and you look at the unincorporated areas of coastline, that maybe don't have funding established, to be able to be provided there. There's a lot of money and a lot of resources that are being allocated within their city limits.
We could save them some money by taking over the library. Holly and I we've discussed that at length. And, I think it's a pride thing with them, but
Oh, yeah.
There's also the
But boy,
factor, there's also the factor of all the social services that we
Yes.
deliver to Flagler County, Flagler Beach residents. I
Right.
mean, it's an extremely broad topic, and
it is.
I mean, for me, a straight financial assistance. I don't know how you get to even discuss that, considering, we don't study their budget. I don't know how they allocate their resources, if it's efficient or not, and then how are you going to come back and justify that?
I don't think they want us to do that, I mean, I'd grade their budget.
Well, they need to take advantage of the tourism grants, and because those are opportunities, especially if it's tourism-based. If the increase is based on tourism, tourism has opportunities for them to take advantage of. And I don't know if you can go asking for other assistance until you've exhausted all possible sources of income that are at your discretion.
For instance, last year when they didn't even make a submission, and they've got another chance right now for this 2-year period, so they can do that. And really basic stuff like, before we start taking money out of our budget, in addition to what we're already doing, maybe they should look at charging people to park.
So it's Commissioner Sullivan and myself that will be attending on behalf of the county. Would it be possible to get something put together showing the manpower and dollars contributed by the county to the Flagler Beach?
We can
Prior to
try
that
to
meeting.
pull something together for you to bring. I mean, I anticipate being there as well. We'll have other staff there.
If we could just, like a one-pager, so we have some, and perhaps maybe there are issues with the city of
As I
Palm
said,
Coast.
we did a little bit of that last year when we looked at, they were, same situation, they were complaining about
Right.
things, and Amy had a one-pager. But
Yeah.
you want to add some things to that. 'Cause
Yeah.
that was mostly
that's what I
focused
wanted.
on the TDC.
I'd like to have something and maybe meet with you prior to.
Do we,
I mean, there's taboo subjects like consolidation of fire and police services.
Yeah.
I throw us out. Yeah, that'd throw us
But
out.
I'm just saying, if you want to look for the big dollars, it's the same kind of discussion, that the federal government doesn't want to have about entitlement spending. I mean, it's like the sacred cow.
Yeah.
But, I mean, if you want to look at where you could really save money, that's it.
Yeah. Do we, I think I've asked before and I don't remember the answer. Do we pay 100% of the lifeguard, or is it we pay a share
It's not 100%, it's a portion.
portion? Okay. I think we just have that number available, what percentage we pay, and
We have it. I know it's somewhere like around $100,000
Yeah,
that we're
it's-
paying, but
yeah.
I'd have to pull their budget to see what the total cost is.
Do we charge for dispatch services?
So we've been subsidizing their radio system. They're one of the recipients of the letter. I think their cost went up maybe $70,000. So we've been subsidizing it. We've also been subsidizing the cost of the CAD licenses. For law enforcement, the CAD licenses are more expensive than fire. So there are other things that we could add to the list of things that we've subsidized that if you wanted to, you could go back and try to collect, but, why bother? We're not trying to do that, but there's definitely a value that the county's providing that maybe either they're not aware of, maybe they are, I don't know. Like I said, the interim city manager had called wanting to set up a meeting And the gist of it was, how can we provide more assistance? And
When you do that list, though, it should really only include services that, that we don't have to provide as a county. I mean, we have to provide the social services,
Yeah.
those kinds of things, health department services, but there's above and beyond. That's I think, the important part of
Right,
the
the
conversation.
important part, yeah.
I agree. Now, last year, they were going to get rid of our IT support. Remember that? And they thought they could make, money doing that. Well, when they checked it out and everything, they ended up back with us. Now, we increased the amount of money we were charging, but it was still a better deal that they could get elsewhere, is what they found. So they've gone down that road a couple of times, and
yeah, they're paying whatever the cost to provide service to them is. We're not looking to make money off of it, but we have hired a dedicated person that supports their IT stuff. Again, we're not trying to make money, but I think that there is an economies of scale when you have a much bigger system than trying to go out and, find a provider. So yeah, there is a savings there.
yeah.
They are
It's hard,
paying.
it's hard to, but
Yeah.
it's there. They took a shot at that one.
So I don't know if you have one particular topic. I'm supposed to let them know who's coming and what is our one topic.
They have to increase their income through. I mean, they just have to face that, and they've raised taxes, they've lowered taxes, they've tried different things, but they don't seem to want to increase their taxable property.
Are they asking for some solutioning from the county? Or are they asking for, what do we have, an issue with the beach?
They're asking for every entity, every city and the county to identify 2 people that are going to come to the meeting and bring your one topic that you would like to discuss. I did hear from the city manager in Bunnell that Bunnell is not attending. So I don't know. I haven't talked to the city manager in Palm Coast, but the city manager was not attending.
Yeah, the mayor of Palm Coast is not happy to even participate, but will. I mean, he'll send somebody to the meeting.
I'm happy to attend.
Yeah, nothing pops up obvious that we should go, because they want to hear something from us that would benefit them, I think. And
I felt I had to go. It's in my district, so.
yeah, I don't know. The beach is, hey, we're already doing the beach.
Any additional beach coordination or work on, that would be, we have a dedicated beach person now that is also adds value that we're doing for the entire coastline, but I don't know if there's anything that we could ask of them to help us with the beach. That would be the one major topic.
I think one of their shortfalls on the beach is the walkovers.
We've
They're-
funded those
They're
through.
struggling with the funding, but they're getting some. funding.
They've laid a contract on. They've
Yeah.
started that process, and in whether or not the Army program, they'll work with them, but they'll continue to put those in.
And in previous storms, we've replaced them. When there was the match, the FEMA match, we funded that for them on previous storms.
Yeah.
So, there's a list that you can come up with of things that we did that we didn't have to do. And it's not that we're asking them for help with anything. It's, I think the only thing that we're really, the biggest, most significant thing that we're tied to with them is the beach.
We also did a lot of work on the Wickline Center over the years. Remember when we had our meals, over there?
We're now holding the July 4th, right, at the county airport?
Instead
Yeah,
of,
we're
Cut down
all
on
combined on that.
people
instead of down on the beach.
instead of down there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Happy to attend. Happy to attend. Not sure we can add to anything, but I'm happy to listen.
I think they gotta look at their tax base and just decide that there's gotta be some changes made for them to continue to provide services.
So would you prefer that I don't give them a topic then? We'll just,
Well, I think
or,
that's my topic.
I-
I mean, that's what you said, Andy. too.
raise
I mean,
taxes?
No, I just say, look at their tax base. And
our
figure if there's some ways that they can increase.
Parking for all the people we're bringing
But,
over.
They got a new hotel coming in.
I don't know that I understand their request for us of what do they want?
Well, they want
Money.
help. They want money.
They want money.
Yeah.
They'd like money.
Yeah.
I mean, they'd like us to be able to contribute because they
But
feel
I don't
that.
think we should make any suggestions along that particular line, so.
No, I think that there's money available through the TDC, that they've got to get their act together and submit the paperwork
Right.
to
You know,
get it.
I mean, I do understand their problem. It's not an easy situation because every time somebody moves into Palm Coast, it's an additional person that's going to go to Flagler Beach for restaurants and beach and whatnot. So, and if you look at, I know when I moved here years ago, St. Augustine was not really that busy, and now it's 365, 24/7, and that I think is spilling down. Volusia, the Volusia County Daytona is busy, and I think both directions are coming to Flagler
Coming this
Beach, and
way.
it's a found vacation destination, and it's probably not going to change. If anything, it's going to continue to grow. They're gentrifying some of the older buildings. Newer, nicer restaurants are coming in. So they're Airbnb and everything I think that they can. So anytime you go to Flagler Beach now, it's busy, even middle of the week in March or April. So it's a difficult planning problem.
Did we, I wasn't here, did we help them with their legislative asks, or do they do that on their own? And
We partnered with all of the cities.
they only came up with one, right, last year, or the
Uh,
pier?
They put in the pier, and I thought that they had a request for some utility stuff, but I don't know if they got it.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if they had the utility,
I think they just got the pier.
just the pier.
I mean, I think we go as a listening, ears wide open and a collaborative approach to what their problems are, and can always bring those back and see if we can offer help or solutions.
Are you going, David?
Yeah.
So we got good cop, bad cop.
Why am I the bad cop?
That's good, Don. That's good.
Oh, God. I don't think we have a topic to bring to
Yeah.
them, but we're happy to go and participate.
I think don't submit a topic, and we'll just go listen and let the good cop and the bad cop talk about it. All right. Is there anything else, Ms. Petito?
I have nothing else, thank you.
All right. Al, do you have anything? Okay, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Oh, public comment.
Thank you, Don. We'll open up public comment. You're welcome to come up and talk about anything we've discussed here today. You'll have 3 minutes. Please identify yourself and address the commission. Seeing no one approach, I'll close public comment. Now, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
We're adjourned. Thank you all.